Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Stargirl Season 3. It was called The Killer. And as it starts, we see that Mrs. Croc is making a cake and that she goes out jogging with Mr. Croc. And they talk about how they have to do something about Cameron's grandparents. But it has to be something nonviolent because they don't do that anymore. And at the same time, Artemis, their daughter, seems to be planning to go to college in Nebraska. Mike and his friend, who I guess is named Jakeem, are in the woods running from the Ultra Humanite, and they ask Thunderbolt for phone service, which gets them an old-fashioned phone booth, which they can't use because, one, they don't have a dime, and they don't know how to make a collect call, obviously. Meanwhile, Courtney, Pat, Starman, Yolanda, and Courtney's mom are trying to figure out where Mike and Jakeem could possibly have gotten to, and if the McCants are behind their disappearance. Speaking of whom, Grandma McCant is sitting vigil at her husband's hospital bed and telling Cameron that he needs to do something about the JSA. And when I say hospital bed, of course, the grandfather was injured in the fight last week. Rick has his injuries from the fight seen to by Beth's mom, and Beth tells him to take off the hourglass, but he resists. The good news is, it turns out that the art teacher that was spiked last week didn't die. Pat and Starman visit Mr. McCant looking for Mike, whose location he knows nothing about. And when Pat suggests putting their differences behind them, he says that his wife can't because they killed their son. Speaking of the wife, she visits Courtney's mom at home and almost ice picks her, but Mrs. Croc steps in and backs her off. The boys wind up getting trapped in a net in the woods while trying to get home and while trying to look for Cindy. And it turns out that Cindy is the one who set the trap because she was trying to catch the Humanite. She lets them out of the trap and basically tells them to go home before they hurt themselves while she continues to do her thing. Mrs. Croc tries to teach Courtney's mom how to use a crossbow, and it doesn't go well because she's a lousy shot. Courtney and Cameron have a conversation about his father, and he's very upset that his father was killed, even though he knows that he was kind of not a great guy, and he demands that Courtney tell him who did it, but she says it doesn't matter. He tells her that yes, it does matter, and so she says that she killed him, even though it was Mike. And Cameron says he doesn't ever want to see her again. The Crocs then go to visit the McCants to see if they'll listen to them because they used to be on the same side. But the old lady, of course, declines to do so, at which point the Crocs keep trying. And the old man eventually says he can forgive and he thinks that his wife should too. The boys make it back to the garage and they tell Pat and Starman about the Humanite, whom of course they are familiar with. When they then explain to Courtney and everyone else the history of the Humanite, which by the way is messed up, Courtney realizes that just like the various people from different sides came together before to defeat Eclipso, the same thing has to happen again, and they would even need the help of the McCants to defeat the Humanite. Artemis confirms that she's going to college in Nebraska in a phone call to her folks just before they discover that someone is distributing unflattering leaflets about them from underneath the street. And as they investigate, they discover that Icicle is somehow still alive, at which point he attacks them both, and they manage to declare their love for each other before they freeze over, and he shatters them, which sucked because they were turning into good people, and they would have been an asset to the JSA in the fight against the Humanite, and he just friggin' killed them. Not to mention how it's going to affect Artemis. You know, in these things, dead isn't always dead, so we'll have to see, but it's they look pretty dead to me, like permanent. So, yeah, the guy that's been watching everybody on camera and skulking around in tunnels in a hooded cloak has been Icicle the whole time, who, of course, was dead by having been shattered, but yet here he is. So we'll have to see if the Crocs are gone for good. I hope not. Although what's left of Stargirl isn't really all that long, so I'm not sure how much it matters. Anyway, I thought this was a good episode. I liked, seeing the Crocs be good guys. They've been sort of going in that direction for a while, but in this episode, they really went for it, I thought, and more than they had up to this point. And I thought that was really cool. I'm glad we finally know who was under the hood, but I'm bummed that it's Icicle because he was a bastard. I'm glad that Courtney, and Cameron are now finally, they've come clean, or she's come clean with him. Even though it didn't go well, at least he knows everything now. And, maybe they can reconcile. The scenes with Mike and Jakeem and Thunderbolt were funny. So I liked all of that. What I didn't like is that yet again, no one was in the suit. We don't see Stargirl, we don't see Starman, we don't see the staff, none of that. And that's why I watch this show. I like the costumed heroes. Last week we got Dr. Midnight and Hourman and Wildcat, which is great, but like, can we see one of the star people in costume before the friggin' show ends in like 3 episodes? That would be good. I would appreciate that very much. Also, what I don't understand is why there are two enemies this season. Like, what is the point of dividing the focus between whatever the Humanite's been up to, which has been fuck all, really, and yet he's this big bad. He hasn't really done anything this whole time except maybe kill the gambler and menace Starman. And Icicle, who also hasn't done shit up to this point, apparently, except watch people. So I don't understand what's going on there. And, I liked the episode a couple weeks ago, or the couple of episodes a couple of weeks ago with Shade and Jenny and all that, and Helix and Mr. Bones. But like that doesn't figure into the larger plot at all. So I don't know. It's kind of disjointed. Like I kind of found that whole thing much more interesting than what we're dealing with now with the Humanite and Icicle. I don't find it interesting compared to that. And I don't know why they made that a small part instead of trying to do something more with Green Lantern and Mr. Bones and that whole thing. I think they should have. So I don't know. I mean, to get back to some good stuff, I think the acting continues to be great on this show. That Breck Bessinger is Bassinger, whatever her name is, she's really good. So, if nothing happens to save this show, I certainly hope she goes on to other things, and I'll be interested to see those things. But that's really it. This was a decent episode that didn't have any major flaws, but it also wasn't, anything great. I said I liked it. I didn't love it. So hopefully the next few episodes that wrap up the season and the series, thank you, WB, will be good. I will, of course, be back to review those episodes. I'm going to take off for now. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.